the interaction with a normal human being, that makes you more attractive. That makes it all come together a bit better. All right? So it is very, very important that you be selective in your intent. It's also important that the girl, if she's going to date you or be in a relationship with you or sleep with you, this is very important. Remember this. It's important that the girl feels like she's winning. Okay? She should feel like she's winning by being with you rather than losing by being with you. Okay? So if you walk up and your entire approach, the entire premise of your approach is, you're so hot, will you please come sleep with me? Now, if the girl says yes to that eventually, she could come with you and have like a great night of sex. It's no problem. Girls like sex too. It could happen, right? And in fact, on sort of a less obvious level, that's how a lot of guys game. That's how a lot of guys game is like, oh, I like you, I like you, I like you. And the girl's like, well, okay, you're a little lame, but you're fun. Oh, a little lame, but you're cute. All right, well, it's the end of the night, I guess, you know, I don't want to go to bed yet. I'll just hang out with you for a little longer. And then eventually they're like, well, you know, he's kind of cute. It's late at night. I'm kind of horny. Okay, fine, I'll give in. Right? Okay, fine, I'll let him have sex with me. Right? That's how a lot of guys get, and that's how a lot of guys get laid. And nothing really, I guess, wrong with it. But it's not the ideal. Right? The ideal, like what I'm going for in my game, is I want it so that at the end of the night, the girl is like asking me to have sex. I want it to be like when we go home, I'm like going and like, you know, I'm in the kitchen like grabbing a drink of water, and she's like patting the bed and be like, come here, talk to me. Come over here. Why are you not like that kind of thing where she wants me? Or when we start kissing, she's the one like kissing me. She's the one that starts like taking my clothes off, ideally. Now, does it always happen this way? No. A lot of the times it's mutual, or even I'm still escalating more, but she's escalating back. But that's what you should be going for. You should be going for that sort of interaction where it's mutual and it's not like she's just giving in, but she's an active participant. And ideally that even she's winning in some regard. Right? So if she feels through the interaction that you started talking to her, you liked her a little bit, but you weren't sure, and then she said some cool things, you respect the fact that she said some cool things, she won you over, now the narrative in her head is, oh, I won. Oh, I got him. Oh, he was interested in me, that kind of thing. Right? A lot of girls, this happens a ton actually. A girl meets a guy, and she doesn't really want to sleep with him necessarily, but for some reason, he doesn't seem that into her, and it like annoys her. She's like, why isn't this guy into me? And she's like, you know, I don't really like him, but I'm gonna make him like me, right? I'm gonna figure out what's with this fucking guy, right? And then they work for him and like try and get him to like her, and then one thing leads to another, and they have sex. Happens a lot, and that's winning. That's when she feels like she won, and the interaction's a win. Let's take the opposite view. Let's figure out a scenario where it's very easy for the girl to feel like having sex with you is losing. One that comes up for me a lot is, let's say, for example, that a girl knows what I do for a living when she meets me. Very interesting. What frame does that put in the girl's mind? If the girl sleeps with me, she's just the next girl that fell for it, right? She's the next girl that fell for the pickup artist pickup lines. Yay, next notch on the bedpost, right?
Hey, that's kind of
If it's framed that way, it's framed as, if she has sex with me, it's a loss. What would happen in the girl's mind for it to be a win for her? For her to win, sort of socially, it would be if I take her on date after date and spend time and attention on her and don't have, like, without her even having sex with me, when theoretically I'm the guy that could, like, get all these other girls, right? That makes her very high social status compared to them. Excuse me. And interestingly enough, that's exactly what tends to happen when girls are very aware of what I do for a living early in the interaction. As they get into these interactions where they're like, oh, let me, you know, have you take me on 20 dates and have you jump through hoops and, you know, let's just be friends and hang out for like a year. Like that's sort of their frame, because that's sort of how they win, right? Even if they're very intrigued by me, very attracted to me, it kind of goes that direction, or it has a tendency to go that direction. Now, fortunately, I'm very good and I can actually turn that around a lot of the time. And also, fortunately, I'm able to frame things in other ways so that it is more of a win for them, right? And here's the interesting, ironic thing. If, for example, we just like, you know, it's just like, you know, we meet, it's so much fun, we don't really talk that much about like work or whatnot, and then we just like each other and hook up, and then afterwards the girl finds out what I do for a living, now the sex has already happened, right? And now how does she win? The way she wins is by keeping me around.
Oh.
The way she wins is by being like, here's the player guy, oh, I'm gonna win him over, oh, I'm gonna tame the player. And then it actually kind of works to my benefit, right? But it's all in the framing. It's all in, is it a win for her or a loss for her, right? It's all in perception, okay? And the other thing to realize is that for men, we usually know, at least pretty much, if we'd sleep with a girl pretty quickly. Like we look at a girl and we're like, yeah, I'd fuck that. Or, you know, whatever, right? For a girl, that's not necessarily the case. She needs to kind of get to know you a little bit and needs to sort of experience your personality because it's less to do directly with the physical. Now, some girls, they'll just see a hot guy and be like, I want to fuck that guy. And that does happen, especially at certain times in their life, certain times in their ovulation cycle, whatever. It does happen. And certain types of girls just are that way. But for the most part, women need more personality conveyed and it's less to do with physical. So they need that experience. And this is where, how many of you guys have heard Julian's metaphor of like it being a movie? Have you guys heard this one? Yeah. So he says basically it's like a movie. The interaction's like a movie. And the climax is the best part. The end of the movie is the best part. The sex being the end of the interaction, that's the best part. But the climactic part only matters, it only makes sense if you've seen the rest of the movie. Right? Outside of context, it doesn't have that same meaning. And so that's what the girl really wants, is she wants that whole movie building up to it so that the climax itself is good. So that it's meaningful and it has a good narrative to it. And that's, again, letting the girl win. Right? Letting the good guy win in the movie as opposed to the bad guy, so to speak. So keep that in mind as well. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the initial interaction, how to show intent, and actually what you brought up, which is a good point, which is how do you pick your target? How do you pick the girl that you actually like within the interaction? And that's that you bridge the intent gap a little further, right? You take a risk, basically. You take a risk of escalation with the girl you like that you're not taking with other girls, right? So that's really what it comes down to. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about in terms of intent is we talk about value and comfort, right? Value and comfort. But the thing is that building comfort, getting to know the girl, should also be intentful. And this is where guys mess up a lot. A lot of guys are really good at conveying themselves as like cool, alpha, fun, dominant guys and getting the girl to like them. And like, okay, cool, time to build comfort. And then they suddenly become Mr. Cho. They're like, so where are you from? So what do you do? So how old are you? So what college do you go to? And the girl's like, what the fuck happened to that cool guy I was talking to 10 minutes ago? Like, where'd that go? Right? So two things. Number one, as you're getting to know the girl, pepper in that intense stuff still. Right? So you're getting to know her, you're building comfort, you're letting her trust you, and you're saying, I'm interested in getting to know you, which, by the way, is intentful. Right? But then you're also still peppering in the flirtatious stuff. It's not just a logical conversation. And then the second thing is ask questions you actually care about the answer to. Don't just do this as a formal process. Do not ever think of game as ticking a series of boxes. That's how so many people think of it. You know, the old thing that we learn in school is like, you know, first base, second base, third base, home run, right? Did you get to first base? Did you like, that's like from the 50s and stuff, but it's the same kind of thing, right? Did you kiss her? Did you feel her up, right? Don't look at it as a series of like steps to be accomplished. Look at it as a dialogue. Look at it as communication. Right? This is one of the best things my dad ever told me. My dad told me two good pieces of advice about game growing up. First is he said, if you want girls to like you, just say hello and goodbye to every girl, whether she's attractive or not. Right? This is probably the best piece of game advice I ever got that I never followed as a kid. Right? Great piece of advice. And the second thing he told me is love is communication. Right? And for this I'll say like intimate, like anything sexual, anything man to woman, it's all communication. So it's not about the actual act itself, but it's about what is the communication of that act. So for example, if I had a choice between I'm interacting with a girl and like we're kissing, but every time we kiss, I'm like trying for it and she's like kind of like being okay with it and then she's ending the kiss first, versus we haven't kissed at all, but we're like holding hands, and if I drop my hand or pull away, she like grabs my hand back. I would prefer the second one, even though like in the check mark theory, the kiss is like more advanced than holding hands. I've gotten further in the interaction. I care much more about the nature of that escalation. I care that she's participating and that the communication is she likes me, we like each other, as opposed to I want something from you and you're resisting it. Right? So the communication matters more than the objective. That makes sense? That's very, very critical. And within the scope of getting to know the girl, within the scope of the building comfort phase, all that kind of stuff, ask questions you genuinely care about the answer to. I want you to actually be screening and qualifying for real. Don't just ask questions because you know you have to. Don't just ask like dumb shit like, oh, can you cook? Are you adventurous? When you don't give a fuck, right? What I would encourage everyone in this room to do is make a sort of like a mental list of maybe about 5 qualities that you really want in a girl. Ideally non-physical qualities, okay? Things that you can't just see by looking at her. And then when you're talking to the girl, once you can tell she likes you, start actually assessing whether she has these qualities. And actually, interestingly enough, as you're assessing whether she has these qualities, if you communicate the right way to her, a lot of times she'll adopt those qualities with you. Human beings are very, very flexible in the way they interact. Like, I would guarantee you probably that the way you interact with your mother is different than the way you interact with your father, different than the way you interact with any siblings, any coworkers, and different than the way you interact with someone you're intimate with. And to a certain level, you could almost say you're a different person for all those different people, right? I mean, you're still you. You still have a core values and a core personality that you are, but you are a different person in all of those contexts. Similarly, when a girl dates a variety of guys throughout her life, she is a different girl for each of those guys, right? For one guy, she may be the very, like, you know, structured, do it by the book, like maybe not even like very sexually open type of girl. For another guy, she might be the like, oh, who the fuck cares? Let's just have fun. Let's be adventurous type of girl. Because she has those different abilities to have those personalities within her. It's just a question of which is she bringing out for which guy. And that has to do with like what she's comfortable doing with him, the nature of the interaction. It also has to do with what sorts of like guidelines and expectations he has had and he has demonstrated within the interaction. So number one, when you are getting to know the girl, find out if she has those qualities. Number two, encourage those qualities. Encourage those qualities, because it may be that she's not used to being a certain thing, but she'd be very happy being that way, right? It may be that a girl has been very sheltered her whole life and she's like done everything her parents said and everything her teacher said, and that's how she knows how to interact. You ask her about it, she'll tell you that. If you don't guide her, she'll continue being that. But she would love more than anything else to actually do what she really wants and not listen to someone for a change, or not like you'd follow all the rules for a change. And if you actually encourage her to, like, you know, like be adventurous, take some risks, take some chances, she might love you for it. She might not. You don't know. So it's a process of, on one level, screening, finding out what she already is. It's another process of establishing for her what type of girl you're looking for and allowing her to fill in that mold if she wants to. And so a relationship becomes this sort of average between what you want and what she wants, where it's not like you dominating everything over her, but it's also not you falling into all her frames either. It becomes a situation where you both ideally are happy, right? And a good thing to think of on this, this is another Derek philosophy, which I really like. He says people say relationships should be 50-50. He says, fuck that. I think a relationship should be 95-5. And he doesn't mean that it's 95% him and 5% the girl. He means for both parties, it should be 95-5. It should be a lot of, we're doing the things we want to do. We're together because we love the things we're doing together. We love the interaction. We love it how it is. And then you do have that 5% where it's like, you know, she's like, you know, come meet my parents. You're like, well, I don't fucking like your parents, but I'll do it because it means something to you, right? And that's okay to have that 5% because the rest of it's so good. But mostly what you're looking for, you're not trying to like mold someone into being 95% who you want, but what you're trying to do is screen and find the girl who naturally or is able to be 95% what you want, while still being happy and being 95% what she wants, right? And that's when you have that truly great relationship. In order to have that happen, though, you need to actually be screening. Not just going through the motions, not just qualifying because you know you have to, not just because you know she has to like jump through some hoops for her to feel like she won, right? But actually legitimately qualifying. So that's like a homework assignment for everybody. When you go home, think of 5, at least, ideally, qualities that you actually really want in a girl. And then when you talk to girls, actually try and find out if they're these things and actually tell them, show them that this is the type of girl you're looking for. Let them know what they're getting into. You'll find your interactions will be massively better for that. And if you want to, you could even say like, you could have 5 qualities for like a one-night stand type of girl and 5 qualities for a relationship girl, because they might be different. Right? It might be that within a relationship, you want a girl who's like, you know, follows the rules and is smart and responsible and that kind of stuff. And then for a one-night stand, you want a girl who's just fucking adventurous. Who knows? It could be. But in any case, whatever the interaction, know what it is you want, convey it honestly, and allow the girl to fill that role. And if she isn't the girl that'll fill that role, well, you can find another girl who will, most of the time. We'll go from the back of the room first. Yeah?
You gave a few examples of going from like expressing yourself to getting to know each other and then talking about the togetherness. Mm-hmm. Can you do that same kind of, some examples of the sexual verbal escalation going from weather to sex?
Sure. Well, one easy way to go from weather to sex very quickly is you're talking about the weather and you say like, oh, it's so hot today. Be like, oh, wow. Well, you know, I appreciate that. I just got here, but thanks, right? You could just misinterpret it. Or if the girl says, I'm so hot today, you should look at it, oh, really, right? There's all these ways to misinterpret something, move it forward. Another way is to just change the topic, right? You're talking about the weather, and you can just throw something in. So, blah, blah, blah. So, oh my God, there's the cutest look you just gave me. But yeah, it is unseasonably warm, isn't it? Right? You just throw it in there like it's not that big of a deal. And then you see how she responds to it. If she seems to if she blushes and is happy and like giggly over the fact that you said it, that's probably a good sign. If she is kind of put off by it, then maybe you have a little more work to do, or maybe it's just not going to happen, right? So you can always test that, but understand that conversation doesn't have to be linear, right? You shouldn't be able to trace a conversation, right? If you ever had those conversations where you stay up with your friends and you're just like discussing life, and all of a sudden it's like 8 in the morning, you don't know what happened to the night? If someone were to ask you on those days, what did you talk about? You probably wouldn't be able to give them like a linear dissertation of exactly. It probably went a lot of different ways. Maybe you're talking about something and someone has some random thought they throw in that's completely off topic but kind of vaguely relates back. That's how a normal conversation goes. And it's okay for it to be that way. Your conversation does not have to be linear. It doesn't have to go from like level 1 intent to level 2 to level 3. You can go from 1 to just sprinkle in a little level 4 and then back to 1 and 2. You just have to generally be moving in that direction. And it does not have to be logical at all. I could have, I can just do a little monologue for you if you want, where it'll be a little ADD, but it's not even that weird, right? So yeah, anyway, I was born in actually Colorado, which in some ways is similar to Texas actually. Although we have, you have like Texas' state of mind, don't mess with Texas, all that kind of stuff. And then you have Whataburger, right? Which is, that's just Texas all the way. Yeah, we ski in Colorado though, we ski. Actually, well, now we snowboard, but when I grew up, we skiing. I can't even speak English. It's so funny, actually, my English teacher, he told us that, he was a very like elitist school, but he said, every time you open your mouth, you convey yourself as a member of the ruling class. I thought that was a really like interesting, like very elitist thing to say. But yeah, I lived in New York for a while. And it was fucking crazy, because it's all these like really successful, like upwardly mobile people, and like they're all doing these amazing things with life, but they live in like little fucking closets and it smells bad, right? And there's like cockroaches, and I'm like, why does everybody want to live in this fucking place, right? So there I just discussed like 6 different topics. It was a little bit nonlinear. It was a little all over the place, but it wasn't like so crazy that you necessarily noticed it, right? But what did I really, like what was that little speech about? It's about this, that, this, that, this. It's totally normal. It's totally okay for you to be a little all over the place. And so if a girl is talking about some topic that is not going to take the interaction anywhere, if she's talking about her like purse collection, or like gossiping about some coworker that you don't know and you're just bored by the interaction, it's fully okay for you to interrupt that interrupt that conversational thread and move on to a thread that's more likely to be conducive to the type of interaction you want. It's totally fine. On the other hand, if she's talking about something she's deeply passionate about, a lot of times the best thing to do is sit back, listen to her deeply, like acknowledge, maybe make fun of her here and there, or like, throw in your 2 cents. But for the most part, let her talk about what she's passionate about, let her open up to you, right? And so if that's the case, that's totally fine too. So you don't have to be interrupting all the time, but you do have the opportunity to do so. And you are not stuck on any conversational topic, even if it's your own. If you start off with like, talking about some conversational topic and you can tell like a minute in, oh shit, this is going nowhere, don't be like, oh, I better finish my story first. Just interrupt yourself and go on a different direction, right? The emotional content of the communication matters much more than the logical. Does that make some sense within all of that? Cool, yeah.
About celebrating social equity, I'm trying to reconcile 2 things that you said. One is that a lot of times if you try to overspend, it closes that door. But then you also said that when you try to kiss, but it doesn't work out, that's actually better than not even doing it. So that's what I'm more at.
Good observation. Very good observation. So in that context, this is an interesting thing too. What you're basically talking about right now is there are 2 different models of game at play here, and one is more important than the other in a particular context. So one model of game is the social capital model, and that's important in this context. So within the social capital model, if I try for the kiss, if I had succeeded at kissing, it would have been better than failing at kissing, right? So within that, social capital makes sense. The other model that's at play here is that you have to show intent model. which is overarching, which is if game without intent is not game. So you're better off trying to kiss and failing than having not tried, especially if there's not been intent in your interaction otherwise. Does that make sense? So it's better to have intent badly than to not have intent, but it still would be even better yet if your intent was good. So the intent model is the more important model in this particular situation. So that's the overarching model, but then the social capital model still is at play. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I feel like based on my experiences, I agree with that too, because it feels so much worse to go through so many experiences where you don't go and try to do anything, whereas like that haunts me to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna do it now.
Yeah, that's why I finally did. I was like, I've failed by not trying way too many times. If I'm gonna fail anymore, I'm gonna fail by trying. That was the big distinction for me. That was my big decision at like sort of the end of high school. Yeah.
Okay, so earlier we were talking about how it's obvious that a girl doesn't want you to grab her hand. You kind of cut it out after a while. I also watched a lot of Alex online, and he has this 4-try rule, this 4-time rule. So how do you think about that? Do you give any attention, or do you just say, no?
Right, okay, so there's a few different things there. Now, first of all, like there is 4 times rule, right? You can try up to 4 times, totally agree, persistence is good, and persistence actually conveys again that you believe in yourself, right? If the first sign of it's not gonna work, you just quit, that conveys I don't believe in myself, I don't believe in my product, etc. right? So persistence is a good thing. Within like the social capital model though, there's 2 things. Number 1, there is the 4 tries rule, but at the same time, it'd be better if you got it the first time. Right? It would be better if you didn't have to go through times 2, 3, and 4, but those are still available to you. Does that make sense? So that's a part of it as well, is that. Hang on, there's one other thing I wanted to say. I forgot I lost my thread on that. I'll come back to that again. I had one other thing I wanted to say on that, and I just completely spaced on it. But the general thing though is that the persistence is fine to a point, but it would be better if you didn't have to. That's the biggest thing. Oh, the other thing I was gonna say, here's what it is that there's 4 times rule, assuming that the tries themselves were not really awful. Okay? So if you try for something and like try and like hold her hand or whatever and she says no, but it's in a happy, fun, cool vibe, then you can try again. And then if it's still in a happy, fun, cool vibe, then you can try again. Right? But if the first time you try and take her hand, she says no, you're like, fuck you, cunt, this isn't, like, what the fuck is this shit? How dare you not take my hand? Who the fuck do you think you're talking to? Right? Once you do it that way, you're at the 0 tries rule. Okay, the 0 times rule. So and Alex actually says this too. He qualifies it that way. He says as long as you're not like socially retarded, as long as you're not. As long as you haven't done anything socially miscalibrated along the way, you get up to 4 tries. If any of the tries themselves are inherently awful, then you get no more. So that's also a factor. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, see, I love intent because a lot of that's probably one of my better qualities compared to anything else. But my problem is like when I give all my cards away, like I always want to have like 1 card back, but like how can we always hold 1 card? You know what I mean? Like, because you know you always want her to chase, but once you give the intent, she can't do that. And I've also had this problem, like, it'll go really well, but because I'll get busier, I'll just not, like, lead back to the girl, because, you know, you end up getting a lot of numbers eventually. And I know that the set went amazing, but the set will just fizzle out. How can I reapproach that, too? You know, how can I keep that 1 last card?
Okay. So that's a very interesting model that you have in your head. And it's accurate to a point, and it's actually very helpful in a way, but you also have to be careful about it, okay? So I'll speak to it on 2 levels. Number 1, you're right in the fact that you do want to show intent, but you can't give everything away. Because we also talked about making sure that the girl knows that it's a win, right? Making her feel like she won. So if you go in and you're like, you walk up to a stranger and you're like, I love you unconditionally, I will do anything for you. Well, there's no more sexual tension there. There's no more like, I win if I get this, she already won. Like victory is already achieved, there's no accomplishment, there's nothing in there. And all the tension in the relationship goes slack. So that's what you're talking about in a way with keeping 1 card back, is like keeping that sexual tension, making sure she doesn't 100% know for sure she has you. That's a little bit like we talk about that movie, right? Where you want to have the movie and that makes the climax better. Well, if someone tells you what happens at the end of the movie, right, it makes the climax shitty. Right? So it's the same thing. If it's too obvious, if you're given so much intent or so much of your, your sort of like so much of you away, and you've said like, I will do anything for you, I have no ability to walk away from this anymore, then at that point, yes, it does become boring. And that actually can happen a lot. That happens in cold approach. That actually happens a lot in relationships too. At some point, someone just like, they will not walk away from the relationship no matter what. And then the other person just starts like nibbling at them, right? They start like, going for like one little concession, then they concede that and they go for another one. And then eventually, it's like the metaphor of like the camel that pokes his nose in the tent, and then eventually like he's sleeping in the tent and you're sleeping outside, right? It becomes that, so you end up in a situation you don't want to be in, but worse yet, oftentimes the other party will now not respect you anymore from the fact that you let them do that. So not only like this, because it's sort of like a hell of their own making, where they turned you into a person they're no longer attracted to, and they also turn it into a shitty situation for you.
So how can we turn that around?
So
how can we get them back? Because I know that there's like a few girls that I approached, and
they let me finish one question before we get into 5 others. All right. So you do need to always maintain some level of standards and some level of willingness to walk away. Understand, and this is very important, okay? Understand that no woman is going to fundamentally make you successful or a failure with women, okay? Now, that's not to say that no woman can change your life, right? If you marry a woman, have kids with a woman, have a great relationship with a woman, that did change your life in a positive way. If some girl screws you over, that changed your life in a negative way. So the girl can definitely have an effect on your life. But no girl determines whether you're successful or unsuccessful with girls, because if you don't end up with that one particular girl, you have a certain personality and skill set and ability and like level of charisma and whatever you have. And if you're not with her, you'll find another girl of probably roughly equal caliber out there somewhere. Okay? So don't think that like you absolutely have to have this one and only girl, and that no matter what happens, you can't walk away from it. Okay? You need to have that level of personal standards. Number one, so that you don't take it too much within the relationship, and number two, because it will make you remain the type of person that's worthy of the relationship. It will make you stay the type of person she'll respect. So have those personal standards. If you have at some point relaxed on those and let yourself be overstepped on them, it's difficult, but what you can usually do is you can either gradually reestablish them, or at some point you can just like be like, hey, look, this is not working. If it goes this way, it's not gonna, like, we won't last, but I do love you, I do care about this happening, so let's find a way that this can work. And you just step up and you say, like, these are my standards now, right? It's a lot harder to reestablish boundaries once you've let them slip. It's a lot harder to lay down the law once you've let it slide, but it can be done, right? It's much better to have your boundaries and your standards from the start. The other thing that's interesting, though, which be careful about, is that you're talking about this, like, keeping one card in reserve, and that's where your value comes from. Right? That's very reminiscent of when I first got into game. It was like the canned structured game, where it was all like, oh, you can't have me, no, hands off the merchandise, you and I wouldn't get along, that kind of stuff, right? And it does compel girls to like you. The problem is you're basically relying on a gimmick for your attraction. In this case, you're relying on the I have one card held back as the gimmick for the attraction. And the problem there is that as soon as someone sees through the gimmick, you've lost everything, right? So the problem we used to have with like, oh, hands off the merchandise, this won't work, you and I wouldn't get along. The problem there was as soon as you go to escalate physically, so you're like, oh, hands off the merchandise, this wouldn't work, no, you're embarrassed, don't embarrass me in public, how do you roll with this girl? And they're like, hey, you're cute. And she's like, wait, why are you touching me? Why are you trying to kiss me? Like, you've been pushing me away the whole time. Was that all fake? Was that all bullshit? And so it made the process of escalation, which is kind of important to get, like, if you want to have sex, it's important to get physical at some point, right? It made that very difficult because it was incongruent with the other thing. Yeah. So anytime, and that's just one example, but anytime you're relying on some kind of a gimmick for attraction, you're it's very easy to be found out. In poker terms, it's a very exploitable strategy, if that makes sense. It's not a robust strategy. It's not something that really fundamentally is solid or works. It's sort of like, it's a gimmick, right? And so it'll only work to a point. It'll only work in certain contexts to a certain level. It's not fully rich. So what you want to be, though, is a man who genuinely has standards. A man who has enough abundance, whether you have it already or if you just like borrow it from your future, just assume you're gonna have the type of girls you want in the future and say, these are my standards, this is what I'll take in a relationship, this is what I won't, this is what I'm looking for. That's gonna go a long way for you, overall. You have a question?
Yeah, with your dad's advice of we say hello and goodbye to the woman, could you word that in a different way so you more context to it?
Well, the time he told this to me, I was about, I think like 5th grade. And he said to me, son, someday soon you're going to start to notice women. And you're going to think they're pretty nifty. And you're going to want to like have interactions with, like, whatever, have relationships with them, something like that. It's like, and I'm going to tell you, here's what you need to do. It's very simple. He said, just say hello and goodbye to every girl.
Or it's someone in your friend group. Where would you say, because I know that you always, like, showing intent is good, but then there's definitely kind of, I don't know.
Risk and reward.
Yeah, there's,
Yep.
there's like some sort of escalation to it as well, I feel like, but I don't know.
Yeah, typically what I would say is, first of all, like, if you're ever going to take big risks in those sort of circumstances, be smart about it. Be very smart about it. Like, don't do things that, if you have a job that you like, if you hate your job, what the fuck, who cares, right? But if you have a job that you like and would prefer not to lose, be a little circumspect about like who you choose to interact with in that way, and also in what context you do it. If you're hanging out outside of a work setting and something happens, that's a lot better in that context than if it happens within the work setting. The big thing I would say, and this is actually another good topic of intent as well, is that there's certain types of conversation that you can have with anyone and it's just socially acceptable, even if it does convey some emotionality, even if it can create arousal. And then there's other forms of interaction that you really can't have without it being, without it creating a something's happening between us frame. Okay? And sort of to answer your question, I'm going to give you a different example that relates, which is, let's say you're talking to 4 different girls in a group, right? And we all know that if you're talking to the girls in the group, oftentimes you have to kind of engage everyone, otherwise one of them's going to get bored and drag the group away. So people ask me sometimes, if I'm talking to the girls I'm not interested in, or if they're like the more vocal ones, how do I make sure that the one who I end up with, who ends up liking me, I end up having like a real man-to-woman interaction with, how do I make sure it's that quiet one who I actually like? How do you do that? And the thing is this, you can talk to everyone without making it man to woman. You can even flirt a little bit with everyone without making it man to woman, right? You can tease them. You can tease them about, oh, you're so silly, you're such a clown, or, oh my God, what am I going to do with you? Those kind of things. You can do that kind of stuff to a limited amount with everybody. But oh my God, I love this girl, she's so much fun. We'd be like the best of friends, right? You throw in the word friends all of a sudden, and like it's okay, right? So you can flirt and like have that back and forth without making it man to woman. But as soon as you go, you know what, I'm very intrigued by you, right? When you single one girl out and say that, or if you say, you know what, you and I are not going to get along, right? When you make the fact of you and her getting along an issue or an item, or be like, you know what, part of me wants to have a crush on you, but part of me is not so sure, right? As soon as you like are overtly saying things like that, or overtly like, you remember the platonic conversation, you and I, and then we. As soon as you're starting to bridge into like you and I bridging towards we, that's when you're starting to get to like dicey areas, right? When you're talking about something potentially happening between you. Also, if you start escalating the nature of the conversation to sexual, right? Talking about the weather is totally platonic. Talking about like sexual experiences with someone is very sexual. So it's that gradient, right? So there's a certain gradient that you can do in any context. Within different contexts it changes, right? Like in some very formal contexts, you can only flirt just a very little bit before it's inappropriate. In other contexts, you can flirt a lot more before it's inappropriate. But there's certainly a level in those contexts where like if you cross that threshold, it's the inappropriate level. So what I would say is interact on the level that's still appropriate, but is showing the intent that's available within that environment. Does that make sense? And the other thing that will help you actually in a way is if you're generally a talkative person, generally a friendly person, and generally have a little tiny bit of flirtation in your interactions in general, that will extend that range that you're allowed. Right? Does that make sense? Like if you're like the quiet guy who never talks to anyone, and then to the girl you like, you're suddenly like making sort of hinting at suggestive jokes, the obvious is like, what the fuck, that's weird. But if you're the type of person that like talks and flirts with everyone, kind of has like a joking relationship with everyone, including even guys, right? You're just like, hey, whatever, not like in a sexual way, but like making fun of them even, right? If that's your nature, if you're that social guy, you'll get away with more in that context as well. But the thing is, there's a lot you can do within that safe realm. And then the other thing you could do is like get the situational escalation to a place where it could actually happen safely if you wanted to. But be very circumspect. Don't do stupid shit that's going to lose good jobs, okay? I don't want to get emails from people like, you fucker, you gave me this advice and it lost me my job. I don't want that. I always say that games should be a benefit to your life rather